I'm Steve, and I want to thank you so much for watching this two-part conversation with Graham Pedragrosa. We talked for about 2 hours about some content about racism and specifically trying to focus on Canada and what that's like. We talk about the government, we talk about, because he actually works in government, we talk about just his own experiences, and I believe it's a value-adding conversation. And so check it out. Again, it's 2 parts, and so it's going to be kind of abruptly cut off about halfway through. So if you're catching either half of that, then you'll know kind of why you're either just jumping into a conversation or the conversation just abruptly ends. Enjoy.
Anyway, Graham, I am so grateful that you are willing to have this conversation. And just to kind of get this going, I want to explain that the idea behind this is, as Christians, we are called to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. So loving God with all of our heart, so our emotions, our compassion, all of our heart, soul, so who we are, our mind. So we have to take things critically, consider things thoughtfully, logically, because God is a God of order. He's not a God of chaos. And with all of our strength, meaning that there's nothing left over. And so when the Bible says love your neighbor as yourself, the idea is you're already loving God with everything that you are. And so you're now trying to love your neighbor also to God, right? And so when the Bible talks about we are all created in the image of God. It goes back to that second commandment that says you shall have no idols. So when we look at each other, it's actually because we were made in the image of God, and the word idol is also the word image. And so when we look at each other, right, whether you're Filipino or white, we should actually, the other person should be kind of like that signpost of worship to God. So saying, look up, praise him. And so that being said, I'm going to really quickly pray before we kind of move into this and submit our conversation to Jesus. Lord, we thank you so much for who you are. I thank you for Graham. I thank you for his willingness to have this conversation. And Lord, I pray that your favor would fall upon him, that your grace would be all over his life, that Lord, as he goes in through and about his business, that Lord, your favor and your grace and your spirit would be guiding and leading him and using him in profound ways. And so Jesus, again, I thank you for this conversation. I pray that this would be enlightening to not only both of us, but also to anyone else who engages with it. So God, may you be with us right now in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome. So Graham, just give us a quick snapshot. Tell us a bit of your story, however long that takes. I'm guessing probably 2-3 minutes, because the moment you go beyond that, it's going to be awkward and whatever else. But
sure.
Go for it.
Well, quick note. So I'm Graham. I was born and raised in Sarnia, Ontario. I'm a second-generation Filipino-Canadian. My parents moved from the Philippines to a town of 73,000 people called Sarnia in southwestern Ontario, and in the late 80s and early 90s. And we basically were one of the first Filipino families there. I grew up in Sarnia. That's all I knew. And went to university at Carleton in Ottawa, and then ran for city council as one of the first. There has been, but like very rare, you see a person of color run in city council in Sarnia. Lost by 1,000 votes. I'm still salty, but I know one day it will. One day, I don't know, but I was super happy about the results. But I didn't get it the first time around. But it was really fun doing that. And now I work for the Ontario government in Toronto. I'm the executive assistant to the Associate Minister of Transportation, GTA. Her name is the Honorable Kinga Surma, and I also work concurrently with the Honorable Caroline Mulrooney, which is the daughter of a former Prime Minister. So it's been fun. I've been hopping around, but now I live in Toronto, and that's basically it.
Cool. So how old are you? I think
25 now.
25, ran for city council and lost by only 1,000 votes.
At 23, yeah.
At 23, right. So So yeah, salty. No,
Yeah.
but like that's amazing, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not only a testament to your character, because you already have a ton of influence and all that kind of stuff in Sarnia. A lot of people respect you. Um, a lot of leaders respect you in Sarnia. Um, I mean, you were also one of those fun high school guys where when all of those bans on having pop in high schools took place, you got creative. Why don't you give us a little bit of that story?
Yeah, so this is kind of my first entrepreneurship things, and this was the year that they took away all the junk food and pop. I had 1 year of high school where you can get chocolate bars in the vending machines. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and then the next year, the Ontario government actually banned it from schools, and I was like, what? So I thought there was a opportunity in the market to people still wanted their chocolate bars, people still wanted their pop, and I sold Coca-Cola out of my locker for $1. This was and it was fun. I sold it to teachers. I sold it by the case to teachers at some points. I sold it to students. A
A
whole
true
operate.
black market.
I had a whole operation where I had maybe 4 lockers I bought out from kids, and
I forgot
I
about that.
yeah, I had them all around the school, and I had other people help me sell these things, and for us to keep it it was an operation. I know we had to how we got things to keep all the pop to get cold because it was winter. I would bring coolers and we would go outside to get snow to keep them cold in the morning. So by lunchtime they would be cold because everyone wants a cold pop, right? It was it was great until one teacher thought I think it was against the law to have a business in the school. So I almost got expelled from the whole public school board for doing it. So I had to stop. But I think a lot of people, even when I ran for office, I think a lot of people still remember it. You were that guy who stole pop out of your locker. I said, yeah. And you know what? It was great because I was able to have a hot lunch because most people had a cold sandwich because they didn't want to spend on the overpriced poutine or French fry or hot meal they were serving at the calf. My whole goal was I want money so I can afford a nice hot meal for lunch in the cafeteria, and I was eating like a king for maybe a good month. Just trying to, cause,
I
yeah.
remember you telling me roughly how much money you made. Are you willing to
Yeah.
divulge that?
Yeah, so we were making at one point $50 a day.
Yeah.
And I was giving cuts to some of the people who were helping me out. Here's $5, here's and I was literally using a sour cream container or something just to give out payouts to people, and this was my wallet and cash register, and yeah, no one blinked an eye
It's
for at
amazing.
least a good month. Yeah.
It's amazing. I love it. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's why I respect you, because you're very creative. You try to think outside the box, and
Yeah.
and the irony is, while you're breaking the law, you're now working for the law.
Yeah. In a weird
so,
way, but at the same time, I think it was yeah. I think I've always been, that was kind of my first step into life, where it was you can look at systems and you can look at government, you can see laws, but there's always ways to how can you challenge it? How can you
work it.
work it, basically? How do you look at a system and see where did you put holes in the system? Unless it's a foolproof system, there's got to be holes, right? So and that's one of the things in government and politics you always have to look at. When you want to create a policy, or you want to create an action, a government action, how are people going to exploit it? How are people going to do this? How are people going to do this? How are people going to react to it? Those are things that you have to foreshadow that too, because you can't just roll it out and then wait. You have to predict. So yeah.
No, that's good, man.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of just jump into some of this big stuff now that people have an understanding of who you are and a bit of your heart. This isn't one of the questions that I asked ahead of time, but I thought it's probably worth it.
Sure.
So we're working from common ground. can you quickly define racism and define prejudice, and maybe the difference between the two?
I think when it comes to racism, it's basically it's a systematic. It's basically a systematic idea of that one certain race or nationality or of your skin color is better than someone else, or you
Okay.
have overarching privileges um, and that idea seeps into society where people are like, oh, you're Asian, you can't do this, or I don't want to hire Asian people for my
Mhm.
job, or I don't want to hire Black people for my job because I don't feel comfortable having Black people. And then you kind of and there's this and you can see this racism not only in North America, but you see it all around the world, where you see like I had issues where people were like, I don't want I want an Indonesian, you know, because like someone with fairer skin to be part to working with me instead of a darker skinned person.
Mhm.
And that's where kind of racism kind of seeps in, and as well as like and that overall like judgment of a race that you're better than a certain
Mhm.
people from a different part of the world or a different skin color. I think those are things. Prejudice, I think when you look at prejudice, it's basically kind of the first thing that pops into your mind. But with prejudice, there's always like a racist back undertone to it, racial
Mhm.
undertone. But sometimes people don't realize it's like uh, a racial undertone. So if, let's say, someone who's lived in a white community all this time sees a Black person, walk down the street,
Mhm.
their first thing is like, who's that? What is he doing here? Things like that. Not knowing that if a white person walked down the street the same way the Black person was doing it, they wouldn't be asking those questions.
Mhm.
So, but there is still racial undertones with those prejudice, but they don't know it. I think
Mhm.
I've met a lot of people growing up in Sarnia that they've made comments about these kind of things or asked the same questions, but then you kind of have to ask them, you have to throw it back at them. Like, what if it was someone your own kind or, your own same skin color doing the same thing? Would you be asking those questions, or would you be thinking the same way
Yeah.
on
So
that?
just for my clarification, would you suggest that maybe the idea of prejudice could also just kind of involve ignorance, right? So it's because they just don't know.
Yeah, because they don't have the actual experience or they don't know,
Mhm.
right?
Okay. So ignorance is in there. Yeah, because when you say that, what goes to my mind is, and I'll be sharing this in another conversation with someone else, but my first experience with like seeing a Black guy in real life, like I remember that moment. I was about 3 or 4 years old, and it was in the hospital. Now I grew up watching like Reading Rainbow. I actually
Yep.
watched
LeVar
um,
Burton.
yeah,
Yeah.
Family Matters and Fresh Prince and all that kind of stuff. I was actually watching all that stuff at that
Yeah.
age
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's what was on TV, and
Yeah.
and so so like it wasn't that I'd never seen a Black person before. I just never seen a Black person in real life, and so I remember looking at this older Black guy and just wanting to understand what I was seeing and who he was. Like I wanted to just kind of go up and touch his skin and all that kind of stuff. Which, I mean, again, 3 4 years old, is that racial? No, but I think when you don't have experience, when you don't have something to work from, a framework, it causes you to start questioning,
Yeah. And
right? And it's out of
that's human condition. You start questioning everything, right?
yeah.
So
So okay, perfect. So that all being said, have you experienced in your own life like a full blown racist moment? Really, not racial, racist.
you know what? My first I don't think there's so many like microaggressions. I think a lot of people say what people are saying. When race comes. I mean, my color has always been my race, my color has always been a topic of lots of discussion of who what I am, where I came from. I think one of the things I dealt with constantly, and when I ran for office in Sarnia, I know I came back. I went to school for 5 years, and I went back to Sarnia. One of the things was when I knocked on the doors, the first question I was like, "Hi, my name's Graham. I'm running for city council," and a lot of the first question I got, probably 8 out of 10 times was, "So you're like from here, right? Like from you're from Sarnia, right? Like you're born here. You're like, yes, I'm born here. I don't like this is all I know. Sarnia is all I know." Another thing I realized was it didn't really happen to me per se, but I remember I was in university and I had a bunch of people who were from the UAE, so from Dubai, and they were talking about how the Filipino were the help. And I was
Okay.
like, listen, like I'm not and I had two other Filipino guys, and they were like asking these Filipino guys to like move their luggage to their rooms, and basically they were talking about how like Filipinos are the help, because a lot of Filipinos go to Dubai to work as like maids and nannies and people who work like the fast food there. So when I'm in Canada and I hear that, I'm like, well, we're not a help. We're as equal. You're as equal as me and you. Like we're not. You can't look down. You know, you can't look down at us in in that sense. And I think I don't know if it was racial, and I'm starting to learn. But when I first started that clothing line in Sarnia, I started a clothing line to raise money so I can go to university with some of my friends who are all minorities, and a lot of people gave us backlash for starting a business in Sarnia, and like having like four young guys, all minorities, all of different backgrounds. You have Vietnamese guy, Sri Lankan guy, a Filipino guy, and a lot of people were like, "Why are you guys starting a business? Like it's not gonna work." People, and these are people who are your peers, and like I even looked at some of the messages. Some were like in racial undertones over things, and I said if like I said, it comes back to like if four white guys made a clothing line, will people have a problem with it?
Just so you know, just
Yeah.
when I push back on clothing lines, it's because I had two students when I was in Listowel who did create a clothing line, two white guys, and I made
Yeah.
fun of them too. So,
Oh no, no, I'm sure, but like people were like mad, like there was some we looked at some of the messages a couple of weeks ago, and there were some like the N word was pushed around.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
brutal.
yeah. Like I'm like, and like you understand, a lot of these people from like me and the father, we were all second generation, pe- people, and the people who were talking down to us like, you guys should just chill, like you can't like start marketing stuff like this, like it was kind of like putting us down on like our
So,
business was.
just for clarity's sake, what kind of clothing line was it? Like,
Yeah,
what
so
were on the t-shirts
we
and all that kind of
basically
stuff?
sold a sweater that said Victor, like like winner basically, and it was like a streetwear line. Yes, it was kind of cheesy at the time, but people were buying it. Like we were selling like 500 units. We were making like thousands of dollars. I was 12th grade. I won a scholarship from Peter Mansbridge from this. Like it was like we thought this up at like 3 in the morning after playing like Call of Duty, playing on the PlayStation 4, and then on the PlayStation 3 back then. Like, hey, do you want to start a clothing line? And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, let me pull something up on Photoshop real quick and let's put on a shirt and see if it sells. Like, it wasn't like, let's go do this. Let's and it sold really well. And so when you had and a lot of people were like, well, this is not usual for 12th graders to just start a business and make lots of money out of the blue.
No,
And
but if you started off with a pop black
yeah,
market scheme in your
yeah,
locker, it kind of
yeah,
makes sense.
sure. So there's always like I think there was always Sarnia. I never one of my first, when I was growing up, I had a Jamaican uncle. So my uncle, not uncle, like great uncle. He was different skin color. I never saw it when I was a kid. I just knew him as my Uncle Headley. Great guy, was like, was he's passed away now, but he was such a big pillar in my developmental stages, that like the color of me being Asian and him being a Jamaican guy never really crossed my mind. But this was after 9/11, a couple of years, 2003, 2004, and he's like, you want to go back to, he lived in the States. He's like, you want to go see, like, drive with me to Lapeer before your parents want to go for a fishing trip on the lake. I said, yeah, sure, let's go on a fishing. So it was just me and uncle. So you have a 10-year-old Asian kid or 8-year-old Asian kid and a Jamaican guy in a truck going to Lapeer. And I'm going onto the U.S. border, and the U.S. border guard's like, do you know this kid? And he's like, this is my nephew. Like, like, he's like, how are you guys related? So, well, my wife's Filipino, and they're sisters, and there's like, and the border guard got really aggressive, and I'm like this little kid in the passenger seat, just like, is everything okay? Like, is everything okay? Like, and I didn't realize till maybe, 6-7 years later that, like, it was probably because my uncle and I were like two totally different races. And you don't why did my uncle have to like get like reprimanded? Like, we had to turn back and get a letter from my mom that yes, it's okay to.
Yeah, no, see, so to that point,
Yeah.
right? Like, that actually is one of the reasons why I wasn't even allowed to really go into the States.
Yeah.
Was because of all the custody orders, right? So
Yeah.
when growing up, my parents were divorced and all that. So
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to go in the States. I wasn't actually allowed to leave the country. So I wasn't able
Yeah.
to go on a missions trip in high school when I wanted to for that reason. So, like, I would say that the guy was probably a bit too aggressive, but at the same
Yeah.
time, like, understanding the paperwork stuff, like,
Yeah.
that happened to me. So, yeah, no, so that's fair though. Like, cause yeah, like, I think if most people saw like in Canada anyway,
Yeah.
if someone saw a big black guy, and I mean, I don't know if he's a big black guy. I'm totally profiling
He,
that,
he was
right?
he was 6 foot. He was a big guy. He was like 6.
Okay.
Like I'm like a little Asian guy. Like I'm like the disparity of like the
Yeah.
two were different. Like, totally, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Right? So it would cause you to go, huh? Especially if you're trying to cross the border, and
Yeah.
but at the same time though, a 10-year-old isn't going to be like start lying, right? So
Yeah.
Anyway, totally one of those things, right, where we understand. Yeah, I get what you're saying. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you think that it's offensive if someone refers to you as Asian? So like, if okay, so here's the truth, right? Mary and I, if we're watching like a baking show, and if it's all white people except for one person of color, right? So black, Asian, whatever. Until I know their names, I'll refer to them as their hair colors if they're white, and if it's like the one person of color, it's like the black guy, right? So is that, or the Asian or whatever? Do you think that that's offensive, or do you think, or what? Give me your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot. I've always been the standout Asian guy. I mean, when you go to like, I was the only Asian guy on a football team at one point, right? And everyone just called me the Asian guy because there was some people just didn't know my name, and I mean that was the best way to describe someone, right? I think that especially, I don't find it offensive by any means. It's a descriptor of who I am, but I think that I think we need to have, if you're trying to get to know someone or a group of people or things like that, I think people need to always continue to try to find and get to know people. I mean, when I was in university, I had a lot of Caucasians in my program, right? And it was hard to just understand everyone's names because everyone's name was Steve, Mark, John, Matt. Like, it was like trying to remember, and there's this psychology and bias where it's like, if you're not from like, other people will see other races the same. So in criminology, there's someone that's like, if you say, oh, it was this black man, but really, because there's other races, people are like, oh, all Asian people look the same, right? And that's usually usually people say, when people say, oh, all Asians, it's usually someone who says that from a different race, because they're not used to growing up in an Asian community. For an Asian person, they see differences amongst Asian people, so it's like, oh, they don't look the same to me. But then I can also say, oh, all white people look the same,
Yeah.
because I've had that experience where I'm just kind of confused about maybe 30, 40 white guys in a room or people in a room, and I'm just trying to remember names. But like, I can definitely remember if I'm in a room of like 30, 40 Asian people, I'm pretty sure I can find differences. But like, it's just because your mind, and like, there's research on that. But I think that we need to be like, there's jokingly, and then I think there's also like using that as like a weapon in like witnessing crime. I think we come to a sport. It's like, oh, I think you saw the Amy Cooper video. I think
Yeah.
that was big, where it's like, I'm just gonna tell the cops an African American person is threatening me, right? I think that we can use it, as like a way to describe, but also as a way to use it as a description to hurt, right?
Yeah. So just maybe I'll get your
Yeah.
opinion on that. Do you think that she was weaponizing race, or, and it's just because this is another side of it. I know that if my wife goes for a walk in a park by herself,
Yeah.
Her guard is already immediately up.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, I mean, she was breaking the rules, this woman. She didn't have her dog on the leash in this certain area and whatever else. And then the other Cooper,
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
But there's two Coopers.
Yeah, I know. Cooper versus Cooper, right? So, so Mr. Cooper, he says, if you don't put your dog on a leash, you're not going to like what I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
And then, and this is all just what he tweeted when he tweeted the video, right?
Yeah.
So then she begins to kind of become hysterical. So he pulls out his phone, and I think he was justified in doing it.
Yeah.
Because like the moment someone starts calling the cops, you kind of want to have the evidence. And because he admitted what he had done, that's why I'm not really like putting anything at fault on him either. Like, this is just like two people that did something wrong, like not equally, but they both did something wrong. So when she describes him as an African-American male, right, would she have described a white guy as a Caucasian person, or would she just said like, this guy with dark hair, he's we don't know, right? If that was racially motivated, like we don't. I mean,
but
maybe by this point,
but I think the optics of it was like, because African Americans have been targeted in the past. For that, it was like the first thing you had to, I think calling the police was also like not the best thing she should have done. But
no, absolutely, she should have put the dog on the leash and been like, "You're right, I'm sorry."
Yeah,
and just
because the thing is, like, because there's been already these fears of the African American community and police already, and the last thing you want to do is weaponizing, where two white people can have a civil conversation because, oh, they're the same. Back to that conversation. If white community, you see two white guys, they could probably have a civil conversation, but because there's that innate fear because of that person maybe not having those experiences with the African American community, the first thing she wants to do is, instead of having to hold those engagements from both ends, is let's call the police, right? And calling the police on a white guy versus calling the police on a African American person, well, African American communities have had such a tension between the police that it sounds more of a weapon of defense, because this person is calling a institution, like a government institution that has been suppressing these the African American communities, compared to like you call the police on a white person, where probably the person who is the officer is probably going to be white, right? And this is like police have always been kind of
So when you say that, right, I'm wondering, is there a level of prejudice when you say that the officer's likely going to be white?
well, yeah, of course. I mean, it's NYPD. It's probably. But the thing is that like the series of police action versus on African American communities have been, white police forces, right? So like just that that the history of it and how that works, I think it is. I mean, when you go to NYPD, it's probably one of the most diverse police forces in North America, same in Toronto and stuff like that. But you don't know if this man, I don't know the background, but if he lived in a community where most of the police officers were white, right? You don't know
Mhm.
if he's had experiences with the police before, where it felt like, oh, I have, where it has been troublesome. Like a lot of people have bad experiences with police officers in these communities. I know someone where it's like, you know, there's conversations with the African American community. It's like, get ready to be pulled over because you were driving black, right? And I mean, this is the kind of fear and the kind of narratives that have been ingrained in amongst the relationship between the African American community
So
and
when you say
police.
that, that's the narrative. Do you think that it's actually true? Like, and when I say actually true, right? So uh, I mean, there's a difference between my experience
Yeah,
and reality,
right.
right? So, do you think that it's bias, or like that? What's the word I'm looking for? The preconceived biases that we bring into a situation. Do you think that that might be one of the things that's driving this? Because absolutely, there has been events in the past that have taken place that are racially motivated, and that's informing today, right? Where it's not actually, but it is, because what we know is statistically, if you're white, you're actually a lot more likely to get shot by the police, right? Whereas like uh, a black person, you're a lot less likely to get shot by the police, even in a more extreme circumstance, right? So statistically, right? So
Yeah.
it might not feel like that, but that's because the what's being spoken about. Do you know what I mean? So give me your initial thoughts on that stuff.
Okay, sorry, I got lost in your intro. Can you re-summarize that? Sorry, I'm just yeah, sorry. It was a
No, that's
lot. It was
okay.
a lot there. Yeah,
I know. It's because I've had a lot of these thoughts going on in my mind.
yeah,
So, so preconceived biases, right? They can inform what we're thinking is happening, right? So we're going to read everything through our own lens,
yeah,
right? Statistically, what we're seeing is that whites are actually far greater targeted and actually assaulted slash shot by the police than black people, right? Um, so what are your thoughts on
sure.
that?
Well, I mean, so there's this statistic that statistic's been going around, and I think that a lot of people realize that America, and I don't know where your source is on this, but America has probably 9 times more white people than than than, than black
I think
people.
it's eight,
Eight or nine,
right?
somewhere
So
somewhere around there.
it's the African American community. From what I've seen, is between 15 to 20% black people in the
Yeah,
states, and
yeah.
it's about
So
10% Latino. The rest is white.
yeah, so you see that, but if you look at you'll see the number, like the raw numbers, where it's like, okay, yeah, because there's more white people and there's more and more. But if you look at just the black community and you to put it to scale, there's four
Mhm.
times more gun violence and police confrontation and police shootings amongst black crimes within that community. So if you
Mhm.
isolate the black community alone, that you see an upgrade of an increased upgrade of police violence and police brutality and police incidents just in the Black community alone compared to the white community. Even though there is, yes, more white crimes because there's more white people. It's like if you say coronavirus, you have a million people, like 100,000 people in the U.S. because there's such more people in it, but there's got to be there's per capita volumes as well within
For
different
sure.
countries, right?
For sure. But you have to look at the other per capita too, which says that statistically, like who's committing most of the crimes, right? So when you see, or at least the most reported crimes, right? So, um, so again, like if when you see that, uh, and again, I'm trying to just remember the numbers, right? So when it comes to murders, right?
Yeah.
And this is again the reason why I'm using this is because this has been thrown around quite a bit,
Mhm.
and so this is one thing that I'm trying to understand myself, right? You see that, like I think the number was like 6,000 murders
Yep.
in a year. You have 2,000 of them were like black on black. 1,000 of them were white on white, and about 1,000 were other races. The rest was like it was like a majority of the murders when you look at black versus white was black people killing white people, not white killing black people by like almost twice the amount. So 15 to 20% of the population is disproportionately per capita killing the other, right? So obviously the police are going to be involved in that circumstance too, correct?
Yeah.
So give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I think with that, you're we're there's the police system in America has always been a little bit more, has been criticized not only because of the violence, but because they have different training. They're inconsistent across, state lines and stuff like that. I mean, that's huge. But I think because we're looking at more, you're saying, there's been violence amongst blacks against whites more than I think because of that, it destroys narratives that stereotypes, and stereotyping's big, right? Because of these incidents that black people are criminals. Black people, all they want to do is shoot up white people, right? They're from the hood per se. And a lot of people say, well, why can't they get out of the hood? African American, there's this systemic racism in a sense of, they say, why do black people get paid less in a job? Why do black people get carded more? Why do black people get pulled over? I think there's a certain stereotype in that, and I also think that the system in the States doesn't, like, there's this cycle of poverty which has affected African American communities much more because he for years, since the beginning of the U.S., black people have always tried to have struggled to get into, to get that equal, that e- that equal ground to, the white communities in America. And this has happened when I first came to Canada, and especially when I went to when I went to university. I didn't really see it until I got to university. um, I'm not rich. I'm not the richest guy in the thing. I didn't come from, like, my parents lived in, like, we lived in a middle low class neighborhood for the majority of my life. And we came in the late 80s, like late 80s, early 90s. So, you know, I was able to go to university simply because I worked my butt off for getting scholarships, right? But I went to university. Everyone already was able to pay for university because, their mom and dad and their family have been here for generations without any you know, barriers. Some of my friends, are, uh, they've had, they're farmers. They've been here since, where they're back, no backs, like, since they don't know. Remember when they first came to Canada? Like, my great grandfather came basically when Canada started. So they've had this generational wealth of like success, and they
Mhm.
can pay for school. They can go to get the best education. They can, you know, they could probably, since they've been here, they probably know people in the business community in like Toronto that they can get them a job. Now you look at people of color who have been systematically, who have been here the same, especially African American communities, who have been here for as much as white people have been in, but there have been
Are we talking about
statements.
Canada right now? Just be clear.
Uh, I would say my example is Canada, but if you look
Okay.
for African, but like for African American communities in the U.S., but this is not dismissing that we have our own problems in Canada, but like
No, and I do want us to go there.
yeah,
Right?
but in
I was
this,
just wanting to know
yeah,
where we
sure.
were
But
locally.
you look at African American communities, they weren't allowed to go to university at one point because they weren't the right color. They weren't, so that lost a generation of people, of just human beings, just because of their skin color, because they didn't get the education, right?
Mhm.
You go to these Fortune 500 companies who have who have these executives and board members and CEOs. A lot of them, you can trace them back to people who have enjoyed a wealthy, not saying they worked hard or anything, but they've enjoyed these, success without these barriers that African.
Yes. So that's
So
where, just so we can, again, kind of
yeah,
use terms that's kind of going around that are really hot terms.
yeah,
That's where I would agree with the idea of privilege, right?
yeah,
So when you talk about generational wealth that's going back ages,
yeah,
um, whereas like I'm half Scottish.
yeah,
My family came from Scotland,
sure,
right, on my dad's side. Um, so in one sense, I'm half second gen Canadian.
yeah, sure,
um, so like a lot of the privilege argument, right? Do I have inherited privilege because of my skin color? I personally don't think so. Um, like I think that there's elements of privilege in my life because of just having a decent extended family, but I didn't grow up with a dad and a mom in the home for those
yep,
formative years. It was a bunch of abusive guys that would come into my mom's
yeah,
life and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty hard growing up. And because the man that would claim to be my biological father, uh, he never actually paid child support, right? So there was loads of debt in our family
right,
and all that kind
right,
of stuff.
right,
So when we talk about privilege, like I can understand like using that as the definition, like the inherited wealth and status and even culturally, that's where like I would say like yeah, there is probably going to be privilege for me because as we were talking about churches in our conversation before, um, like churches are primarily white, right?
yeah.
Especially in
I
rural
mean,
areas.
you have in states you have white church and black church.
Yeah, exactly,
It's like
exactly.
it's like okay, like yeah,
But we actually have that here too. I
yeah,
know that
yeah,
there's those
yeah.
churches in Toronto as well from friends that I know. That
It's a predominantly black church, as people say, or a predominantly white church.
yeah,
People ask me why the race is so important in the church, and going back, I think uh, you know there is poverty, and poverty is real, and it doesn't affect just one race or issue, but you know it's the society that we've built that has been white dominant. I think has been huge. I think when people look at it as like someone would yell at someone because it's like get out of our country, we were born in Judeo-Christian laws. I think you can say they're using religion, but they're also like this is like European white, you
yeah,
know
no, for sure, for
founders.
sure.
Our founders were white. When I look at history books, right, I don't see myself reflected on any of the founding of this country because you look
No,
at the founding fathers of the country, they
and
were
in the
white.
same way, if I went to
The
the
Philippines,
Philippines,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
and I'm like looking
yeah,
through the history books, I'd be like, I'm not represented here.
yeah. But the tough part is that like I'm not like I could say I love my heritage as much as the next Filipino person. My parents have, but I've lived in Canada, so I've always had this identity crisis of like, so am I Canadian or am I Filipino? Because like when I go, like I unfortunately don't speak my mother's maiden language, Tagalog, right? So
Mhm.
when I go to the Philippines, I just speak like a white English speaking dude, right? But I look like them, right? So then I come here to Canada and I speak, a Canadian English, right? But I don't look like, the foundings of
No,
this
but you
country.
have your name is
Yeah.
Graham Pettigrosa,
Yeah,
so
and the thing is that like yeah, and that's another thing. You go to names, right? Hiring, right? There was a Harvard study that said that like they took out 20 resumes, same credentials. The only thing they changed was John Smith or Tyrone.
really,
Yeah, and the white names got called back more than the black names, and there's prejudice in that for sure.
yeah,
But
for sure.
my
Yeah.
mom wanted to name me Graham. I was the first grandson, the first child in our family to be born not in the Philippines, but to be in Canada. In Filipino culture, usually you name them after the grandfathers. So my grandfather's names were Santos and Antonying and Ricardo, which is my great grandfather. And my mom's like, these names, and she said this to me, these names, I don't think white people who were the people who were hiring, I don't think they're gonna hire a guy like Ricardo Pedregosa, right? So they found the whitest name, and it was named after the namesake of a Christian preacher, Billy Graham,
Oh, really?
Graham Pedregosa, because my mom thought that's an employable name because it was white, because it's a Scottish name, right? My last name, and that was one of the things that was like, and that's the same thing with my brother. My brother's name is Kent.
Mhm.
Right? There's no Filipino background or heritage to that name. You know, if I lived in the Philippines, I don't think my name would have been Graham. I always tell my mom, yeah. So that that because of the system I lived in, there were names, but like I'm not saying like black people should change they have every right to name something from their culture and their history, right? But like I was basically, as someone would say to me, whitewashed my name, right? Same as how indigenous people were, they just changed their names to Christian names because the
Mhm.
people who were employing them, right, or anything, the people who were the employers of the time of the wealth were Christian Europeans, right?
Mhm.
So a name could be so much more. But I just I think that we we see like there's so much that other races have had to change because of it. And the thing about Canada, and I think we're moving to a different topic, but Canada
Mhm.
is more of a mosaic than it is a melting pot. In the
These days.
States, yeah, these days, you go to the States and everyone's like, oh, the States is a melting pot, right? People like how immigrants and other community groups, they like to, they conform to American values. In Canada, I see it more as a mosaic where there are communities, but they're kind of like little parts of a mosaic, like little pieces of like communities are in their own little like areas of, like you go to Toronto, there's a little Manila, there's Chinatown,
Mhm.
but they've kept their heritage and their culture in
So
intact. Yeah,
I'm just thinking like, and again, this is actually just me being curious.
yeah.
Um, does that actually mean that there's actually maybe potential for more problems in the future in Canada than in the States?